Good morning, everybody. Good morning. I'm Kate O'Connor with the Chamber. We want to thank everybody for coming, and with a name like O'Connor, I have to say Happy St. Patrick's Day to everybody. We are very pleased today to have some of the members of the Windham County legislative delegation with us. We appreciate them taking the time before they go to Montpelier to spend the morning with us. What we're going to do, and they've been kind enough to sit up front, we don't want to make it a firing squad because we're a friendly bunch of people. We're going to talk hopefully about economic development, business issues, but we want to open the floor up. We're going to open the floor up to questions that you may have, so if everybody can start thinking, I'm sure they'll be happy to try to answer, or give us updates on what's going on in Montpelier. What I'm going to do is just pass the mic down and have everybody, the legislators, introduce themselves, maybe tell us all a little bit about what's going on the committees they're on, but we ask that we keep it short so we can get to some questions. Someone recommended to me, I don't know if you all watch either the Oscars or the Emmys when the music comes on, you know, when their time's up. Someone suggested this morning that we play Irish music and it'll get louder and louder. So we won't gong you, but we'll just have the music playing. Before we start, I want to remind everybody we got a couple more events coming up. It's the green sheet on your table. On April 7th, we have Pat Moulton-Powden is going to be here to give us an update on the economic development efforts that BDCC has going on. So if everybody could mark that on your calendar now. But let's give a round of applause to our legislators, and then we will have them start. Mike Hebert wanted to be on the left.
Thank you. I'm Mike Hebert, as most of you know, and I represent Guilford and Vernon. My committee has finished its work so far because Friday, this week coming is crossover week. So what we will be doing is receiving bills next week from the Senate, reviewing what they've done, making modifications to those bills or approving them as we see fit, and then they'll move on through the House. So right now we're kind of at a wait-and-see point, and I'll address other issues about downtown development, things like that, if there's questions from the audience. So we're here to hear from you, not the other way around, so here you go.
Good morning. Molly Burke. Happy St. Patrick's Day. And I represent District 2 in Brattleboro, and I'm on the Transportation Committee. And right now, this week, we are going to be passing out the big Transportation Appropriations Bill, which has other elements in it, but that's the main bulk of our work is that bill. And we're also looking at a few other bills that related to that. We'll be doing the miscellaneous motor vehicle bill next, and a couple of other things that have to do with establishing development districts that, and how do you fairly assess impact fees. So that's all for now.
Hi, I'm Dick Merrick. I represent Newfane, Townsend, and Marlborough. I'm on the Judiciary Committee. I've done for 12 years. I'm also Vice Chair in this biennium of the Joint Legislative Committee on Administrative Rules, which I've been on for, I think it's about 7 years. It's been kind of an odd year for Judiciary. We have, for the last number of biennia, we've always had one of the major high-profile bills that has just sort of sucked all the air out of our room. This year we seem to be doing a lot of smaller bills, although we are going to be getting the opiate bill from the Senate probably by the end of this week. We have done a couple of bills though, that are, I think, of real importance to Vermonters. One is passing a bill to ban handheld electronic devices being used while driving, which I think will save lives and certainly will save car accidents. And then we also have passed a bill creating a much more viable standard for prosecution of drug driving, which has had a standard of proof that really hasn't been terribly workable because there are any number of, I'm talking about drugs apart from alcohol, where we have an objective .08 standard, but for drugs, both legal and illegal, there is a huge variety of drugs, and the fact is there are no objective standards for one of them has impaired your driving ability. So we've kind of cleaned that up and sent that off to the Senate. Hopefully it'll pass there.
Good morning, Tristan Tolino. I'm one of the representatives from Brattleboro. I serve on the House Agriculture Committee, and I think I'll just mention one bill that we've been working on. You may have seen in the news that the House passed a bill, H 823, I think, which was related to downtowns. We also have been working on a bill 448 that has to do with off-site. Did I get it right? 823. I said it right. Good. So we've been working on a bill that looks at on and off-site mitigation issues around primary ag soils, which is one of the key criteria of Act 250. And there's been need for a while for a change in some definitions that would allow, basically make it easier for everybody to interpret the rules, and also then to not create sort of strange development patterns in order to protect small parcels of on-site prime ag soils that will never ever be farmed, which is of course the reason why that criteria is in Act 250 in the first place. And so off-site mitigation in appropriate circumstances actually would allow us to have denser development, particularly in downtown parcels, and use that to leverage preservation of larger tracts of prime ag soils elsewhere that have a chance to be economically farmed. So that's one example of what we've been working on. I'm happy to answer questions about a whole range of things.
Hi, I'm State Representative Valerie Stewart. I represent West Brattleboro, District 2-1. I'm on the House Education Committee. I've been on the House Education Committee for, this is going on my 4th year. And I just want to, dispute what Representative Merrick said, because we are sucking a lot of the air out of the room too. In fact, we're about to suck more air out of the room than I want to think about. We are redesigning state governance on the House Education Committee. It is a change that has been waiting to happen for 122 years. I am hopeful that this year we will make major progress. I am not a soothsayer, so I couldn't tell you exactly where we're going to end up at the end of this year, but in the next bit, we are going to do this. And what redesigning education governance is all about, I don't need to tell any of you in this room, any of us up here. We are all leaders, and basically education in our state, even though we are doing a great job in many regards, really needs to be redesigned, because one of our big problems is the churn on the leadership level. And if you have churn, if you have a lot of turnover, right now we're talking 30% turnover in our superintendents, because the jobs are way too big for any one person to do, way too many boards to report to, and I'll tell you more about that later, but the other piece is principals. Those two people are pivotal in any school system. So in order to get better, in order to give our kids the global 21st century education skills they need, both now and in the future, we need to redesign this thing. I'll tell you more about that. And thank you very much for being here. Thank you for what you do too.
Good morning, State Representative John Moran. I had to tear myself away from the Tim Connor St. Patty Day special on TSA hit here. Also, Tim Johnson had to tear himself away because he was on there a few moments ago. And then when I got here, the front door was locked, so I had to go around. So anyway, here I am. I serve in a committee called General Housing Military Affairs, and I represent 7 towns, Wardsboro, Dover, Searsburg, Somerset, Stamford, Greensboro, and Whitingham. And the 3 major bills that's been going through my committee, the first one was a paid sick time bill that passed out of my committee, and it's now in, it passed out 611. It is now in appropriations. We just passed a committee bill on prevailing wage, which I will be presenting on the floor this coming week. And we will start testimony this week in my committee on looking at raising the minimum wage. So obviously a few items that will probably interest some people in this room. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Jeanette White. I represent Windham County in the Senate. I serve on the Judiciary Committee, and I also chair the Government Operations Committee. In the Senate, we have a morning committee and an afternoon committee. I I'll not say anything about that. We've been working on a dental practitioner bill, and I don't know if any of you have heard a lot about it or not, but I can go into any amount of detail you want, but I won't right now. I'll just say that the goal is to provide more dental care to people in the state of Vermont by creating a position that's kind of halfway between a hygienist and a dentist. We've also been working really hard on, and I think this affects downtowns. We know that there's a huge opiate problem in Vermont, and one of the things that we just finished doing, and it will be going to the House Judiciary Committee, is a bill that would, when somebody is arrested, they'll be given a risk assessment and a screening. And if that risk assessment and screening comes up and says that this person, because of their crime and because of their either substance abuse or mental health issues, is more likely to be better served by having treatment than imprisonment, then the judge has some grounds to make some decision there, and there's going to be some leeway for that. We've also done something about a timely judicial review for people who are in a mental health crisis, and I can talk more about that. We did a couple things that directly affect towns. One of the problems we ran into after Irene was that towns did not have the ability to condemn buildings, and therefore the state had to fight for months with FEMA to get the full amount from them for those, particularly mobile homes that had to be condemned. So we've just given towns the authority to do that. We are looking at all the tax exemptions and tax credits that we allow, and there's about this many of them. We just passed a bill that looks at the statutory purpose for every tax exemption, property tax, tax credits, sales tax exemptions, and the House has done some pretty nasty things, we think, about the downtown sales, the sales tax on downtown projects, so we'll try and fix that, or I will anyway. And we also just passed a bill that would allow a special project, pilot project in Windham County on the capped landfill here that would allow a bigger net metering project that could combine the municipality, the school system, the solid waste district, other people, and can go up to 5, and I'm going to say whatever they are. The bill had 2.2, but Senator Galbraith and I worked very hard to get it up to 5, and then there's a pilot project for Windham County. And is Pal here? Brad is. I am working on the Rotary. Once again, I'm fighting with the Transportation Department, and so tell him that I yell at them every day. Thank you.
I'm going to throw out the first question. And I think if it's okay with everybody here, we won't make you folks go up and down. You can relax on a Monday. And this is a sort of a follow-up to what Representative Moran was talking about, and it is a bill that the Chamber Board debated and did take a position on, which is the mandatory sick leave bill. And for all of you who don't know about it, there's a bill in the legislature that would require all employers, no matter what your size, it would require you to offer up to 56 hours of paid sick leave. And obviously that's a sort of a hot topic. About 90% of the members of the Brattleboro Chamber have 30 employees or less. And I can I'll tack on another question with that too. Governor Shumlin has just recently come out for an increase in the minimum wage. So if you folks, we know what we know because we read it in the paper. So if you have some additional information, but we really like to know, because those are two issues that impact the business community. Anybody here who'd like to, oh, I hear a volunteer to go first. I'll give you the mic.
Well, let me first correct a misapprehension, which is quite prevalent. It is not a requirement for 56 hours of sick leave. Any employer who currently offers at least that amount of leave to an employee is already within the law, if that law were to pass, which it is not going to do. Put you at ease on that one at least. There are not the votes in the House to pass the bill. It's as simple as that. So the paid sick leave bill, in my judgment, is not going to make it through the legislative process this year. I will say that I personally would vote for it. And as I plan to vote for the minimum wage increase, so let me receive tomatoes whenever you're ready. I thought so. The reality is the paid sick leave bill, even if it were to pass, which as I said, I don't think it will, 75% of Vermont employers already provide enough leave for their employees to not have to worry about it. The bill also was going to exempt employers with under 5 employees, which probably takes out another 10 or 15% of employers. So you're down to 10 or 15% of Vermont employers who would feel any effect at all if that bill were to go through. Frankly, I think there's a lot of rationale for having that requirement. The area, ironically, that has, and I hope everyone's done eating, the area that has the highest non-compliance with that standard is people in food service, which is exactly where I don't think you want somebody who's sick serving you. Move beyond that. The minimum wage increase in some form, I think, is highly likely to pass. I think most Vermonters support an increase in the minimum wage. I think most Americans, by a wide margin, support an increase in the minimum wage. I do not believe it's likely to be either of the House or Senate bills as introduced. I think the governor has suggested some sort of a phase-in of an increase to somewhere in the range of $10 or $10.50 over a 3-year period. I have no idea exactly how the bill's going to emerge, but I suspect it will be something on that order.
For one of the few times in the House, I will be on the majority side on the sick pay, paid sick leave. I did hear from many small employers that this would be a real hardship for them, especially people in the construction trades, things like that, because as they try to stage jobs and plan out their work week, it's very difficult for them to have someone just call in sick suddenly. Most of the employers do make provision for that, but what they found in their experience is that when they offer sick time, in the mind of the employee, many times it's assumed to be just a personal day or free time that they can take. So I heard overwhelmingly from businesses that they were greatly concerned about this. And I agree with Dick. No one wants sick people coming serving their food, but I don't think that happens very often. On the minimum wage, let's hope it happens.
My eyebrows went up a little.
Are you sick?
20 years in the food service, I think.
Okay. Well, the minimum wage issue I find interesting in that I would rather see more effort in creating better and higher paying jobs than what I look at as an opportunity to make political points saying we're going to give people a raise, the lower income people a raise. Because what happens is we can give them a raise to $15, whatever they want to give for a raise, and the final result is a couple of years later they're no better off because prices and everything else goes up to keep pace with that wage. What we really need to be doing is concentrating on getting jobs that will actually pay a living wage legitimately rather than an artificial benchmark that the government puts in.
I'm going to hand this over to John in just a second, but I would say from 20 years of food service experience that that is actually a very legitimate issue within my industry, and I don't mean to throw my industry under the bus, but there is a long culture of expectation that people will go to work sick rather than take care of themselves and protect the population health. Unfortunately, it's an archaic part of the food service industry.
Well, first of all, notwithstanding comments from Representative Merritt, as Yogi Berra says, it ain't over until it's over. So we shall see. First of all, there's 60,000 Vermont workers who do not have any kind of coverage. And as has been correctly pointed out, if anybody gets any kind of coverage, time off, whether it's for hunting in the fall, whether it's for vacation, the conditions of the bill are met. The reality is that the testimony we took, as a matter of fact, from a very person at the Abbey Group in the cafeteria in the Vermont State House, testifying that she came to work sick, and she was working there sick because she could not afford to take the day off. Because most people who are not covered by the paid sick time are the very people who are working in the least paying jobs and the ones who can least afford to take the time off. Having said that, the only place we've had any kind of, to correct a few comments about the bill, we, my committee very clearly listened to the input from Chamber of Commerce's, both the Mount Snow Chamber of Commerce and this Chamber of Commerce and others, and modified the bill as we went along. For example, it does not apply to employees under 5 employees, or employers under 5 employees. So the very small employers are not covered by this bill. And we also made concessions to the service industry in terms of you can accrue time, but you don't access it if you work in a seasonal industry. And there's also a consideration that a person has to work at the establishment for a period of time before they can start to use the sick time. The only place that we saw a test of this, because it's a pretty new concept, there are some laws elsewhere in the country, but the only place that had this bill in place for a while was in San Francisco, and this law has been in effect since 2007. And the report from San Francisco is 2/3 of the employers were supportive of this bill, and 1/3 of the employers in San Francisco were very supportive of this bill. So some of the concerns and issues up front were not met when it was tested in a place that's been going on for a while. I won't comment on the minimum wage because that question hasn't been raised, but if it does get raised, I guess I will comment.
Yeah. Hi, so Valerie Stewart. I worked in New York City for 14 years. I was in the private sector. I moved here 20 years ago. I've been in the public sector, the nonprofit sector for the most part. Done some private sector work, but mostly nonprofit work. Here's the thing. I'm a PR person. I'm a marketing person. I don't think we did a good job with this bill. The reason, I'm not talking about the God is in the details part. I'm talking about assuring the business community of what we were doing. Representative Merrick did a great job explaining what this bill is about. But business people don't feel that way. And what do business people need? They need predictability. My husband's a business person. When we moved here, it was really tough. And we've worked really hard for a long time. So I get it when people don't understand the details of something. We should have done a better job communicating what this bill is. Having said that, I'll just say a couple of other things quickly. 6 different businesses I spoke to. 2 large, 2 medium, 2 small. All of them were afraid of this bill. None of them understood this bill. Next time, maybe we should do a better job before we try to launch something. Now, the minimum wage, I am for that. I think that is the right thing to do, and I think this is the right time to do it. But I don't think we can do everything at once. We need to, as a small state, we need to create jobs. We need to educate our people. We're doing a war on drugs. Okay, so we need to rank this. Here's how I put it. War on jobs. Educate our people. No, war on drugs. War on jobs, Jesus.
There is a war on drugs.
Could you cut that out of the, thanks, Joe. War on drugs. Educate our people. Create jobs. Contain development. And raise the minimum wage. I would put, those would be my top 5. But I don't think we can do everything at once. We need to grow jobs, pay our people, move slowly and methodically. And I think we're doing a good job of that. Thank you.
Now I'm going to put everybody on the spot. Does anyone here have a question to ask them? Oh.
Hi, Craig Goodenough Rubbish. I just wonder, like I have 6 people on the payroll, and my guys accumulate 2 weeks of vacation a year. Is that in requirement with the bill or law?
You're covered.
That way I understand.
Don't ask, you'd be covered already.
Okay, super, thanks.
Anybody else? There has to be a question.
The focus group right Here, I can project my voice, I think. The question is on infrastructure. As cars get more and more efficient, and use less gas or use no gas, how do we pay for our highways? The same sort of question, as net metering increases, more people have photovoltaic cells, more widely spread. How does Green Mountain Power or whoever pay for all their wires and their generators and stuff? As they get less and less revenue in from selling the electricity, because the infrastructure costs just as much.
Yeah. The question is, as cars become more efficient, don't use as much gas, how do we pay for our infrastructure? And the other question was about net metering. The more efficient we get, how does GMP survive?
How do they pay for their wires?
Yeah, how do they pay for their wires? How do they pay for their equipment? They don't have Molly?
Interesting question. It's something we talk about a lot because there was a study done a couple of years ago that we have a transportation funding crisis in this country and in the state. And in the state, we're $250 million, if we were to do what we needed to do, it would cost $250 million. So last year, as you know, we raised the gas tax, and I think we saw that as sort of a 5 or 6 year, measure to buy some time, and that has been actually very successful. It's really helped us this year. The federal gas tax has not been raised since the 90s, and the Federal Highway Trust Fund is about to go bankrupt next year. So we all use the transportation system, and we need to pay for it. There are talks. One of the things that certainly the state is trying to increase the number of electric vehicles. So yes, who pays for that? And one of the issues that's been discussed is vehicle miles traveled. That you would be taxed. That there would be like a corresponding drop in the gas tax, and you would be taxed on your vehicle miles traveled. There are a lot of privacy issues around that. But those are sort of pervasive in many aspects of our lives. So I think that there's definitely a conversation about that and thoughts about how can we pay for transportation, what's the most equitable way to do that. And stay tuned for more conversation about that. But it is definitely a concern of the Agency of Transportation and our committee.
Since I was the one that brought up the net metering, I'm not on that. Oh, I can't. Nobody's ever said that before. My father once told me that I had a public speaking voice, meaning loud, before they invented PA systems. But anyway, I brought up the net metering. I am not on the Finance Committee, so I don't know, but I think the same question is probably being tossed around on the Finance Committee, and I don't think they have any answers any more than the Transportation Committee does. But they'll stay tuned, I guess, on that one.
As I said earlier, I serve on the Natural Resources and Energy Committee, and the bill that we put out this year on net metering, there is a provision in there to address cross-subsidization. The original bill is expiring in 2017, so we did 2 stages. One, to carry the bill to 2017, and then what happens to net metering after that point. In the bill that we did pass, there is a requirement that the Department of Public Service and the Public Service Board would do a review of the cross-subsidization to pay for poles and wires, because what our bill did was increase the amount of net metering in a utility from 4% of its customer base to 15%. And at some point, we know there's a tip in the balance that the remaining customers will be subsidizing those that are using the net metering projects. And we didn't want that to occur. So there will be a study done. What we did find out from Green Mountain Power is, at this point in time, it would cost Green Mountain Power more money to do the study than what is occurring in cross-subsidization. But there will be analysis done, and if that is the case, when that tipping point is reached, there will be a charge established on someone doing net metering. There will be a base charge, so they would pay their shares of poles and wires.
I'd just like to add one thing. I just found this statistic that I had. And if, regarding a vehicle miles traveled tax, to replace the existing gas tax, it would cost 1.5 cents per mile for vehicle miles traveled. And to replace the total state transportation fund, 3.9 cents per mile. So you can sort of figure out how many miles a year you drive and see what your gas tax might be. And you know, that's just, as I said, that's just one proposal, but those are some statistics underlying that.
Another question? Oh.
I know there was a hearing in Vernon last year to discuss the impacts of our region because of the closing of Vermont Yankee. I'd like to know, can you give us an update on what the legislature is doing right now to help Windham County?
Well, actually, what has occurred is there has been some agreement between the state and Entergy itself to provide some money for economic development, and you know that has yet to been signed, sealed, and delivered. We're waiting for that. But much of what's been done has been done more on a local level, reaching out to the state. You know, Pat Powell and her group down here, the SEVEDs put together an excellent economic development plan, and the state is supportive of that plan. And then it's a matter of where we're going to get funding to do that. So we're hopeful that what's going on with Entergy does transpire. But at this point in time, at least in my committee, we don't have any bills in front of us that deal directly with that other than what's already transpired and I think people are well aware of.
So nothing.
Yeah, so I just like to add one note to what Mike said, which is basically I, on a monthly basis, organize the Windham County delegation and have people come up, first talk to us, and then talk to the speaker or whoever else in the building they deem in their best interest. It's easier during the legislative session for us to get together up there than it is down here. Mondays are pretty busy days. I'll just tell you about me. I mean, I came back from Boston last night. I have to go to Northampton to deal with my global climate change skin cancer. That's what all these, I didn't do a face plant on the ski slope or anything. So the long and the short of it is when Pat Molden-Powden came up, I got her on the agenda in January. So at least she could really, and I did this last year too, and I've actually done this for a bunch of the last years. I've gotten the economic development people up first, because I really think, as a communications person, that it's really important to make sure that our needs in Windham County, in view of what we're facing, are front and center on the speaker, the pro tem, and the governors. And the governor's from down here, so it's, you know, he's a boy from Putney, so I think he knows what's going on. But Pat came up and met with the speaker, and she always does a really good job. ROV Technologies, Jill and Pete have also come up. Craig Miskovich, Pat spoke on his behalf about what's happening with the Masabi group. So I think they really know, and Mike is absolutely right. SEVEDS has done great work. Now what we have to do is follow through on that and make sure that the legislature is all over it, and the governor is, and the speaker is, and the pro tem is. Thank you.
I don't want to speak out of turn because I'm not sure that I know this information, but I see Laura's in the back. And I believe that in the budget adjustment request there was some money to get some of the initiatives that were proposed with the SEVEDS and the SEDS plan and all of that to get you guys started, but I don't know if I'm wrong on that. Am I right that there was an attempt to create a sort of a cash flow early in anticipation?
I can't give you really good details on that, Tristan. That was something, I do believe there was something in the Budget Adjustment Act, but I think it was kind of a if the VY settlement kind of gets delayed. So Pat would have the details, and unfortunately she wasn't able to be here. So I can find that out.
Yeah, I mean, it's somewhat conditioned on whether or not the final thing is approved by the Public Service Board, and that's one of the reasons why things are in a holding pattern as we wait. But there is an attempt to move quickly if that is approved, is what I believe. So we took some preliminary steps, but it can't happen until the deal is approved.
And I should have thanked Laura and my oversight. Sometimes the people at the tip of the iceberg get thanked, but not the people who were doing a lot of the heavy lifting. And she's done an amazing job, as has Stephen Morse. Thank you, Laura.
Question over here. Can I just ask one quick question? Is there anything that this group can do to help you folks in Montpelier, get us the resources we need, or is there, if we write a letter, or we scream, or we come up with a buzz?
Talk to people. Come on up and talk to people. They want to hear from you, and we need to hear from you and give us ideas. Give us an action list. Don't tell us the problems, tell us some of the solutions, or at least help us find the solutions. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dave Wellink. I'm the Chief Financial Officer at Vernon Advent Christian Home. I got a call last week from the town clerk in Vernon. They wanted our insurance information. They wanted the property values to our property up in Vernon. We've been in business since 1919 as a non-profit organization, recognized by the IRS in 1949 as a 501c3. We rely very heavily on charitable contributions to do a lot of our capital improvements and property additions. And I was wondering why the state needs to hear from us relative to our insurance values. Is there a theory in place that will go into practice soon?
I'm not on the finance committee, but your insurance values, I mean, they're looking at the appraisal.
The state asks us how to get our insurance values, our property.
Well, my guess is that, I know that the Senate Finance Committee has looked at all the property tax exempt properties, the tax credits, sales tax exemptions, every single, because those are, when you have an exempt property or a sales tax exemption, those aren't actually appropriations going out, but they are foregone revenue. So we don't get the revenue from them. So in fact, it is an expense. My guess is that what the Senate Finance Committee is doing is looking at every single one of those exemptions or credits and trying to they put together the statutory purpose for them now, and now are trying to look at what is the actual foregone revenue from each of those things. And then the legislature, and we actually have been working on this for a long time on trying to figure out where tax exemptions and credits are going and are they worth it. So my guess is that they're looking at then all the 501c3 nursing homes and care facilities. This is what it's costing us to look at what it's costing us in the sense of foregone revenue. Every time there's a tax credit or a property exempt, a tax exempt property, it's costing us in the sense that we're not bringing in that revenue. We're not going to suddenly eliminate all those exemptions, I know that, but I think that they want to get a handle on what it is. If you have the one thing that we did take out this year of the property tax exemptions was colleges and, fraternities and sororities on college campuses. They don't pay any property taxes. So you have a kid living in the dorm over here, or in a house over here, renting a room, and he has to pay, his rent includes property taxes, but you have a kid that lives in the fraternity house, and his rent doesn't include property taxes because they're exempt. So we have removed them. Well, it has passed the Senate, it hasn't passed the House yet, so we'll see. But I think that that's the purpose, is to just get a handle on all the tax exemptions and credits that exist, and then start looking at them. If you go through this list, there are some things in here that I highly question should be either property tax exempt or sales tax exempt. But I'm one of 180 people. Nursing homes is not on my list.
And I'm one of 150, and I raised money in this town for 20 years, so I was very concerned about this, to tell you the truth, sir. And I did ask my friend Janet Ansel, who's the head of House Ways and Means, former tax commissioner, gal who's been in the legislature for how long, Dick? Yeah, but then she served prior in various administrations. She was a top-notch attorney and Stanford educated and amazing. She said, you know, they're really looking carefully at this, and basically their goal is not to tax things that should be allowed to be charitable donations, but like Jeanette said, they're really just looking for the odd things. I mean, sororities and fraternities, I don't think so. I have 2 kids in college, just so you know.
I think this exercise is really healthy to engage in, because so many parts of our legal system and our structure in this state are sort of a pastiche of things that have developed over many, many years. And it requires periodically, I think, to have responsible government, just as my committee in judiciary is trying to look back at certain areas of the law and say, okay, what have we in totality arrived at? And even if the original intent was a good one, is it still viable? Is it still the appropriate place to put resources? Whether it's incarceration of someone for a crime. New York, was famous for having taken the very, very serious stance on drug enforcement. Throw them in jail, give them essentially a lifetime sentence. While they discovered to their chagrin that it didn't really affect drug use, and it wasn't accomplishing anything except to drive prison costs up at a huge rate. And when people came out, they came out worse than when they went in. It seemed like a good idea at the time. It turned out not to be a good idea. And I think it's a healthy exercise, and it's something I've actually encouraged in my committee, that every once in a while, instead of going out and trying to figure out how many new laws we can pass, maybe take a time out and pick an area and look at it from the bottom up. And parts of state government, we're not ever going to do that. I've had conversations with Sheriff Clark and with the state's attorneys about the fact that our criminal justice system in this state is in some ways a relic of our early years as a state, when you needed, because of geography and because of transportation, to have 14 state's attorneys, one for each county, who each essentially make policy as to what crimes they're going to enforce at what level and how hard they're going to push for certain sentences. If you sat down with a blank piece of paper for a political entity that had 625,000 people, I don't think you would start out saying, why don't we elect 14 different people by the voters in widely disparate sized units and have them have complete discretion as to how to enforce the law within that unit. It doesn't make sense. In that case, it's in the Constitution. And unless we amend the Constitution, which mercifully in Vermont is a very difficult thing to do, you're not going to fix that. But there are a lot of areas of state government where we can really do a scrub. And I think the issue of what things we're exempting from taxes and does the original rationale still make sense is a very healthy exercise. Doesn't mean that we're looking for a surreptitious way to raise taxes, but we are looking at the example of whether an exemption for one subset of students who may in many cases be wealthier than other students, whether an exemption for them makes sense. Perhaps it doesn't.
I would agree that a review of these policies is important, and we should do that. And that stems from many conversations I've had with listers in large communities and small communities. As businesses leave our community, we're shifting more and more of the burden on taxes, property tax, to residential properties. And in a couple of communities I've spoken with, Burlington for one, listers, people from there, what they're seeing happen is, as a nonprofit gets a grant to purchase their building, the owner of the building had been paying property tax. And once the building is purchased by the nonprofit, then they are no longer paying property tax. So again, that shifts another burden to the residential. I don't know what the outcome of this study would be, but certainly I think it is something we should take a serious look at, because we do have to address the shifts that are occurring to residential property taxpayers. We all pay that in one form or another, whether we're property owners or renters. We're paying that burden, and every year it goes up, and we do have to look at every avenue or every possibility to make a change to a more positive climate for the residential homeowner.
I concur with what Mike just said and the other people here too, and it's no disrespect for the service you're providing to the community. The trouble is, we have over a $5 billion budget at the state on all budgets, but one thing that is not included in the budget is tax exemptions. There is about $1.3 billion in the state of Vermont that is forgiven up front that's never collected in taxes. We're not making a judgment whether that's good or bad on the different areas that get these benefits, but what we want is transparency. So the whole point here is just to make it transparent. Really, our budget is over $6.3 billion, but $1.3 billion is foregone by not even charging the taxes to people to start with. So we're just trying to be transparent here. It is not questioning the value of TIF programs. It's not questioning the value of the programs Mike just talked about or anyone else. But what we want to know up front, and as business people you would understand, is we just want to know what the budget starts with, and then we go where we go with the budget. So it's a transparency issue, really.
If you have any interest in finding out what is tax exempt in this state, look at S221. What they've done is they've gone through and every single tax credit, tax exemption, or tax exemption, either sales tax, property tax, whatever, is listed in here with the statutory purpose. It's 16 pages of exemptions.
One more, we have a question coming from over here.
Hello, I'd apologize because I will have to leave in about 5 minutes. But one of the questions that I have, or observations, is that it seems like we have a lot of creative ways to raise taxes, a lot of which are business unfriendly. And you talk about education and what have you. I have a couple of daughters who were educated in Brattleboro, did very well, went on to college, but there are no jobs here for them, number one. Number two, it seems like really if we look, instead of from the bottom up, the top down, we really need to create jobs in this whole state. Because if we have jobs, guess what? You won't have to tinker with the tax rates. I think it's ludicrous to even think of taxing a fraternity or a sorority. That would bring in how much money? I mean, you got to really look at the bigger picture. My question and concern for all of you, what are you doing to create jobs in the state of Vermont and to really be business friendly so you attract businesses? I know a lot of people who seem to be going away from Vermont versus embracing Vermont. I would like to see that trend change. It's a beautiful state, but I would hate to see people leave the state because of economic reasons, because of being taxed to death. Your thoughts?
Okay, so Dave, I wholeheartedly agree with you. The reason I'm on the Education Committee is because I think we have to educate our people, but also my top two are education and economic development, which, could be economic development / workforce development. And I think, well, when I started out that we have to put things in order, creating jobs was way up there on the list. And I think I'm crystal clear about that. Taxes are too high in Brattleboro. I've been in the nonprofit sector since I've been in Brattleboro. It's tough sledding. My husband is an attorney, many of you know him, so thank goodness he can float me. But it is really hard for me to make a living in this state. And I made a good living in New York City, gang. So here's the thing. I think we are working on creating jobs, and I think we're doing a good job. I think our governor is leading the charge and doing a great job on that. We have created more renewable energy sector jobs than any other state, per capita that is, of course, in the nation as of this year. So, we are really transforming ourselves and our economy. We have to protect what's good about Vermont, and then we have to improve on our weak areas and weak links. And I think You know, my kids both went here, and both of my kids went to schools out of state. I wish they'd come back. I feel for you. We're trying. We're really working on it. Help us. Come tell us what to do. Come help us. Thank you.
So I really appreciate the question, and I think one of the reasons why we all look and think, you know, how do we respond to this question is that this is complex, really complex system change, which is why the work that CEVEDS has done and BDCC has done to create a SEDS, the federal SEDS, is a part, it creates a structure for change. And one of the things that we do know is that Windham County is falling further behind other parts of the state. That Chittenden County has had 60,000 people move to the Chittenden County area over the last 2 decades, while Windham County has been flat or declining. And so we're seeing the cumulative effect of generational patterns, of the evolution away from a manufacturing base for New England economies to something else. You know, there's a lot that's going on, and where we know, I think that, for instance, in the capital, access to capital programs, there's a lot of, I don't think that we have a capital problem there, but we do have sort of an innovation, a startup problem in the Windham County area. We have to figure out how we get people here who are wanting to try to create businesses here. We have to figure out how we get the people who are here to sort of begin the process of creating something new. Because once they get started, there are a lot of state programs that will support them, but it's that initial hurdle. And I think that that initial hurdle comes with us also recognizing that we have to not just complain about what's not working, but also figure out how to energize ourselves to build our own future. And that is hard work. And I don't mean to imply that it isn't hard work, but that is more powerful than anything that the state can do. And hopefully the state will get out of our way when it's in the way and make it easier for people when that is possible. But fundamentally, we have to find a way to create innovation and opportunity here that the state can then give its structural support to.
Just a couple of thoughts. One is that one of the ironies that we hear, and I think probably all of us have heard this at different times, is both the argument that there aren't jobs in Vermont, and that's why young people don't stay here, and yet at the same time we hear many employers in areas that are growth-oriented and highly technical in many cases, saying, I want to hire people, but I can't find the right people to hire. So we've got some mismatches in the state. I think that's one productive area to try to address. Secondly, we've shown that when we try to address areas and focus on growth, it is possible to create jobs in the state. We've added something like 2,000 jobs in agriculture in the state of Vermont in recent years, because there's been a transformation of the state realizing that, with all due respect to dairy farmers, large-scale dairy is not the way to farm in the state of Vermont. We don't have the topography for it, we don't have the climate for it, and a few of the very large dairy farms are surviving. But the reason we've had a huge reduction in dairy farms is that that industry simply isn't competitive in this state, in many cases, with other states that have better climate and better topography. But what we found is that we can do value-added agriculture, and we can sell our name as a state, our product quality, and, you know, I had Jasper Hill cheese last night. It was also served at a White House banquet for the President of France. I mean, we have real success stories in this state, and we need to focus on how we can create more of those and do so effectively. The answer, most job creation occurs in small businesses. It isn't viable for us to try to compete with New York or Massachusetts in how big a tax break we can offer to lure some large company in here, which can also, as a matter of global strategy, as is the case with IBM, decide to reduce or go somewhere else. Those are not the businesses that I think we ought to try to attract and need to attract. But if we can provide our support strategically, we can actually add value. And I think finally you have to recognize that a lot of young people are going to leave the state of Vermont. They're going to leave for opportunities that don't happen to exist in this state that match their interests. That's been going on for 200 years. And we're not going to change that. What we have to do is focus on the areas we can actually materially affect.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that. A couple of conversations I had yesterday made me aware of the problems for young people here, and who would like to live here but are having a hard time. And I think it'd be great to engage them in some conversations. And that's one thing. And the other thing is that I know one of our children has a business here and works also in Canada, and is aware of how much government support is there in the province of Quebec, and the not having to pay workman's comp is a huge thing. So if we could ever do, sort of a comprehensive health care, workman's comp costs are very, very burdensome and make it very, very hard for a business. So.
Tom's left, but I would agree wholeheartedly with him. We do need a more robust economy. We need to develop jobs here in our state. I think we need businesses both large and small. I mean, if another company like IBM wanted to come in here, I'd be very, very happy. I know that's not the main sentiment in the state. When I run into other people in the House, that there's skepticism about large business. But I do think we need a balance between the both of them. And whenever I receive a bill in my committee, first question I ask is, how does it impact, one, my communities, two, Windham County, and then what does it do to the business community, and how does it help them or harm them? The downtown center bill that was passed out of my committee, that's House 823, basically was a good bill. It's to incentivize people. It gives them an off-ramp from Act 250 to develop downtown and to develop in growth centers. The problem with that was there was an attachment on there that makes it far more difficult for someone to develop outside of a growth center. So I ended up voting against the bill because I saw that as an anti-business climate where you're stopping someone from doing something because it's not in a downtown center. And not to be contrary or argumentative, I think one of the problems that exists up here, when I sit there and look around the room and I look at people in the room, I truly believe there's just not enough people there that understand what it takes to meet a bottom line. They've never had to meet a bottom line. They've never had to pay a payroll. And you need some more business minds in that environment. And I think there's a lack of understanding as to how narrow our margins are as business people. What may seem insignificant as far as a minor tax increase, you have to look at the cumulative effect of doing those tax increases. It's not the penny here and the penny there, it's the dollar that they add up to. So I think what we need is a bit of a shift in attitude towards the business community in and of itself within this state, and a better understanding of what it takes to run a business.
Thanks. I don't have any magic answers, but I do think that our job is to help create a climate where businesses can grow, not for us to create jobs. So we need to do whatever we can to help the businesses that we want in Vermont to grow. And most of it is small. There's not going to be one magic thing that we do that changes all this and creates all kinds of jobs. But there's small things, and I think some of the things you've heard, like the agricultural area, lots of jobs have grown there. We have a jobs bill coming out of the Senate. I think it got voted out in time for crossover, and I don't know what's in it. It's a very long bill. They've been working on it for a long, long time. My guess is it's not going to be a silver bullet. It's going to be a lot of small things. And one of the things that we did last year, just as an example of some of the tiny things that seem really small that happened last year, was an anti-trolling bill. Now, that isn't the guys that sit under the bridge and scare the little goats that go across. This is trolling, and I don't even begin to really understand what it is, but there are entrepreneurs in Vermont who are coming up with great ideas. And they come up with these ideas. They're small businesses, or maybe even large businesses, but primarily they're smallish businesses. And you have these companies around the kind of not so... Yeah, patent trolling. It's trolling for patents. So you send this guy, this company sends you come up with a really great idea here. They send you a letter that says you're infringing on this patent, and you could spend $250,000 to fight this, or they say we'll settle for $125,000. So you pay the $125,000. Most of these are completely illegitimate, but the trollers. So we were the first state in the country to pass a bill last year on anti-patent trolling. Now, I got a number of emails from a nephew of mine who does things that I don't even understand in the music business, and he said that all of his friends are so excited about this that they're beginning to say, hey, maybe Vermont is the place we should go and set up our... So small things like that are, I think, the things that are going to make the difference, not some big answer that we have that's going to suddenly create 4 or 5 or 6 or 7,000 jobs. Thanks.
So that is such a perfect segue for what I wanted to say. Thank you, Jeanette. So I don't know how many years ago GS Precision was founded exactly. So 1958. So gosh, that would be, well, I don't want to tell you how old I am, so let's see, that would be 55 years ago. So basically, GS Precision and Swiss Precision Turning, two of my favorite businesses in terms of what a great story, you know. George Schneeberger and Willie Buhlman, who's my neighbor and my good friend, married to one of my favorite people, Susan Buhlman, who actually works in this building. At any rate, 56 years ago, they founded GS Precision, then Willie broke off and founded his own. I called Norm about 2 weeks ago. I asked him to ask him a couple of things. Number one, I think what he's doing is really incredibly cool. I'm sorry that we don't have the people for him to hire. Well, what is he doing? He's fixing that with his own solution. What is his own solution? He's taking a lot of money out of his own pocket, out of his own 340 people business pocket, and he is educating his own people. So he's doing a school for 13 people that basically they will graduate. I'm sure many of you know this really cool Vermont success story. And he's educating the people so that when they graduate, I believe they'll have, it's either an associate, it's almost an associate, is it manufacturing and engineering or manufacturing whiskey thing? Yeah, so the point is, and then he's going to employ these people, and these people can work their way up the ladder. So this is really incredibly cool stuff. And Willie does the same thing. And Norm and Willie take care of their people. They're both Swiss. They're from Switzerland. Europeans actually take care of their people in many different ways. ROV Technologies, Pete and Jill over here, they're creating jobs. They're training their own people. So they're helping us fill a hole that we know we have as a state. I'm on the education committee because I want to educate our people to do the jobs we have right here, right now. And you've all heard from Governor Shumlin. We do have jobs right here, right now. We would like more. But, so I think these are some real cool Vermont entrepreneurial success stories. You know, we're the can-do people. You know, we're the little engine that could. So we need your help, and then we need to help you. ROV Technologies has a really hard situation right now that, you know, we can't solve everything, and I think we're going to need some really good firepower to help them. But at any rate, I think we are doing some cool things right here, right now, to help our people fill the jobs that are here. And I applaud the businesses that are entrepreneurial and have such devotion to Vermont that they come up with these solutions that none of us maybe would ever think of. They're entrepreneurs. I love entrepreneurs.
We'll do one more question. And we'll let Patty O'Donnell.
Thank you. I wasn't going to say anything, but everybody knows where I come from. I live in a community right now that is struggling. And I know that there are some people that say, well, they've been spoiled for a lot of years, so now it's their turn. I find that offensive because my community has contributed greatly to the state of Vermont for decades through a generation tax. We can't pass our school budget. Our town meeting was the saddest thing I've ever seen. And now we have to do it all over again. It's really sad what's happening in our town. Now, the question was asked, what are you doing to help Windham County? When we have 632 jobs leave this area very shortly, it's going to affect every business that's in here. Okay? They're not going to be, people aren't going to be shopping. I mean, these are high-paying jobs. Some of the highest-paying jobs in the state. It's going to affect all of our retail downtown. It's going to affect our restaurants, because that's where these people spend their money. The answer that we were given about what are you doing to help Windham County was Sevitz. That's what Entergy is doing to help Windham County. Entergy is the one who's giving $25 million to the state. We need to know what is going on in Montpelier to help us. Who is looking at Windham County and saying, how can we help provide jobs? Because we're about to lose our friends. And our businesses are about to lose their customers. And when that starts happening, this county is going to be so devastated that if we don't start working now, we're not going to catch up.
You're right, Patty, you're right, and I don't know what, I do know that in the appropriations bill there are some things very specifically for Windham County. I don't know what they are. I'm not on the appropriations committee and it hasn't come over from the House yet, but I do know that the appropriations committee is looking at some very specific pots of money other than what's coming from Entergy. I don't know. I think that in little ways we've been trying to figure out how to do things for Windham County that aren't necessarily going to cost us money. The pilot project at the landfill it's not going to solve anything, but it might help just a little bit. The downtown, some of the downtown infusion of money that's come in through that, through the Brooks House. I don't have a good answer. I don't. I'm sorry, I don't.
I know we'll do one more. Do you have time for one more?
Actually, I think I can probably speak loud enough also. One thing all of us can do, if any of you have not contacted the Public Service Board to urge them to take action on the agreement made between the governor and Entergy for this next year, please do so. I know the Public Service Board listens to what comes in. Many of us have written to them already, but anyone in this room can help themselves and Windham County and the state of Vermont if we get a ruling from the Public Service Board. Thank you.
This is a quick one. We have time for one more.
I just wonder, I have some friends in the convenience store business with gas stations or whatever, and I'm kind of wondering if when the minimum wage was up to $10 or whatever, it was going to happen to $5 football. How much is that?
To the what?
It's the $5 football, like your Subway or whatever. That wage has to come from somewhere, and we're all going to pay extra somewhere for the guy that's pumping your gas or the fast food or whatever you buy. I mean, I'm all in favor of minimum wage going up, but where does it come from? And the state's going to benefit from more Vermont tax out of a higher wage. So the tax department's going to gain out of that, probably more than a lot of individuals.
So it'll come from the business's bottom line.
Right.
Right.
And with the economy the way it is, how can you do a lot of it? I mean, you look at the convenience stores in town, the shelves are all gone, most of them, and my buddy almost went up north to the northeast Pennsylvania. And you got people that work, and how do you end up covering someone that's cooking a short order breakfast for $6? You're going to pay them.
Well, actually, these states are paying $8.25 an hour because that's minimum wage.
$8.73.
Right, but I mean $8.73. But I mean, he will be paying benefits. And everybody is, for a state.
I think that the question of what the impact of the minimum wage increase, if we pass one, will be, is something that is on all of our minds. And and on an anecdotal or an experiential level of having, I come from the food service sector. I've had hundreds, literally hundreds of employees that fall in that range. And so I certainly have an experience trying to meet payroll and figure those kinds of things out for those people on my payroll. But what we know, if you abstract away from personal experience to look at where minimum wage increases have been put into effect around the country and what the economic impact is of minimum wage increases, basically the research supports that minimum wage increases overall help local economies. And individuals will lose. Some individuals will have fewer hours. They'll have longer time between pay increases because the minimum wage drives up the base rate. But minimum wage earners tend to spend their money. They tend to be more local in how they spend their money. So it actually often leads to better economic opportunity, believe it or not, and that has been across different states with very different economic portfolios. They've looked at the aggregate effect of minimum wage increases, and the aggregate effect of minimum wage increases has been net positive for economies. Those economies have actually outperformed places that did not increase the minimum wage. That said, you don't want to do it too far too fast, because then you're moving the system faster than it can adapt. So there is a sweet spot there, but we are looking at that information, we are thinking about that information, and the information supports the theory that some increase is going to benefit us all, overall.
I spent my entire career after graduating from Knight Law School in the corporate world, so I have some understanding of the corporate world. It has strengths, and like anything else, it has limitations. There is concern legitimately about what the impact of the minimum wage increase would be and the pass-through potential of that. But the number that just absolutely stunned me when I saw it a couple of days ago was that the aggregate bonuses on Wall Street were equal to the entire pay nationally of everyone earning minimum wage. Wall Street bonuses in 1 year were the same amount as the entire earnings of all minimum wage workers in the country. And so if we're talking, and as was said, the minimum wage workers put that money directly back into the economy. Wall Street bonuses do not go directly back into the economy, in large percentage at least. So if we're talking about impact and draining money out of the system, we can look at both ends of the spectrum, and we ought to. We ought to be honest about it. We ought to be fair about it. But the complaints about increasing minimum wage seldom seem to also reflect the other concern. And I think we ought not be blind in the legislature to the impact of what we're doing, but we also ought to think about the incredible disproportion of income that has come about in this country. We have the highest disproportion of income since the Gilded Age of the early 1900s. That does not benefit the economy, it doesn't benefit the country, it doesn't benefit job growth. So we need to really be sure we're looking at the entire picture, and that's all I'd say. And I think we are trying to be balanced on increasing the minimum wage, but anytime there is an attempt to increase the minimum wage, there's an argument for why it isn't quite the right time to do it. The economy is either not doing well, or there's always an argument against it. And I think we need to balance that as legislators. And the biggest part of our job is balancing conflicting goods and sometimes conflicting evils, and trying to figure out how do we do the least evil and do the most good. And it often is an excruciatingly difficult thing. And the strength of Vermont's legislature, though, is that we really have a very open process. We hear from people. We're here to hear from you. We may not agree on everything. We can't agree on everything. I don't agree with my wife on everything. And she most assuredly does not agree with me on everything. But it's the conversation that adds value, because we do weigh what we hear. It's a very open state in that sense, and it is not Washington.
Since my committee will be taking this up in earnest this week, I probably should address your question. First of all, the Doyle poll, which I know is not a scientific poll, but it's an interesting, he had a very straightforward question, number 4 in the Doyle poll, and that question simply was, should Vermont increase its minimum wage? And since we all want to respond to constituents, it was interesting. I've only seen the results from 2 of my 7 towns. Wardsboro, the answer was 81% yes. Searsburg, the answer was 87% yes. So the feedback we're getting in the Doyle poll from constituents is, yes, let's raise the minimum wage. So next question is, how do we go about doing this? And the most important thing is, what effect will it have? And your question is right on the money, and we want to hear feedback. First of all, this week in committee, on Tuesday in my committee, we are going to get a report back from the Joint Fiscal Office and Cavat, who is our state economist. We asked them in the beginning of the year, please sit down and go through the numbers and tell us what effect raising any minimum wage, whatever the amount, whether it's $10.10, whether it's $12.50, what effect will it have on the economy, what effect will it have on the recipients, what effect will it have on jobs. And they have been working on this. They gave us a preliminary report a few weeks ago, and this Tuesday they are going to give us a full report that's going to tell us, as far as they can, from Joint Fiscal and from the economists, what effect raising the minimum wage will have on those subjects I just talked about. And we will listen very closely to this report. We will listen very closely to you and to anybody else who has input. On Thursday of this week, we will have an open meeting in the well of the House, probably a place to be filled, and we will be asking the public to tell us what we should do about the minimum wage. And that's the process, and that's the process that will continue, and we'll see where it goes. Thank you.
First, I'd like to thank Milt Eaton for his suggestion of contacting the Public Service Board. That's very important, because at this time the state is really doing very little for economic development for Windham County. What the state is doing is relying upon that agreement with Vermont Yankee to, in some ways, bail us out. Being from the south end of the state, sometimes I feel, maybe the state ends somewhere around exit 10 on the interstate. We were having a discussion about building a new state lab, and there was zero consideration of putting it south of Randolph. Big project, it's going to employ a lot of people. I think that's what the state needs to be doing, is looking at how we disperse what the state does throughout the state evenly and fairly. And secondly, one of the considerations, and you see every year in the budget, is more jobs in state government. We don't need more jobs in state government. We need more jobs in the private sector. And I think those are the directional changes we need to take. These little drips and drabs that we do presently are doing nothing for our economy. They're doing nothing to help people in Windham County. And Patty, you're absolutely right. In Vernon, it was sad to see what happened at our town meeting. It's sad to see what's going on in our town. And even more sad is it's going to happen to every town, because when that plant leaves, every town is going to be a Vernon. Look around, look at your neighbors, look at where you draw your revenue from. It's not the state, it's your friends and neighbors that work in private sector jobs. And that's what this state needs to concentrate on. We need to look at more private sector development, not growth in state government, how we assist business. I often hear from business people, especially a large employer in the Essex area, you're not doing a whole lot for business, but you're doing a lot to business. And we've got to stop doing things to business and start helping business.
Now that we had a discussion of the minimum wage, we all will end the meeting so we can all go and make our minimum wage. They don't make a minimum wage. Thank you, first of all, everybody, for coming, but most of all, thank you for the Windham County Legislative Delegation for taking the time to meet with all of us, and maybe we'll have you back after the legislature so you can tell us everything that was accomplished. So thank you so much.